Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on working with students with emotional behavior disorder. I'm excited to present to you today our presenters from the University of South Carolina. I first want to introduce to you the leader of the pack, Dr. Dodie Lindberg from the College of Education. I'm going to turn it over to her to introduce her team.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dodie Lindberg. I'm an associate professor in the counselor education program at the University of South Carolina, and I'm also a previous school counselor at all levels. I've had experience, so I'm really excited to be here with you and with my co-presenters, Dr. Jessie Guest and Esther McCartney.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessie Guest. I coordinate the play therapy certificate at the University of South Carolina, and I also am a licensed mental health counselor and a registered play therapist in North Carolina.
Hello, everyone. I'm Esther McCartney. I'm a third-year doctoral candidate at the University of South Carolina. I have my master's in clinical mental health counseling, and I've worked as a behavioral specialist with children with EBD at the elementary and middle school level, and as a crisis counselor for children and adolescents within a rural community of Virginia.
So today we're going to focus on working with students with emotional behavioral disorders. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that is and what to look for. And then we're also going to talk about the importance of developing the relationships with all students, but how it can be unique with students who have EBD. And then also talk about some play therapy interventions that work well with students who have EBD. So EBD is characterized by an inappropriate behavior or an inability to develop or maintain interpersonal relationships with peers and teachers. So I'm sure when you think of some students, you have some kids that come to mind, but this behavior, in order to be classified as EBD, must be exhibited over a long period of time. So it's very consistent and obvious. It's not just a one time or a few times, it's a long period of time, continuous, and it negatively impacts a child's academic performance and these learning difficulties that aren't caused by other factors. So there's nothing else causing them that is associated with their learning difficulties, but it's really obvious that the connection is to the emotional behavioral disorder. So the prevalence of EBD is an estimated 350,000 students receive services for EBD in public schools, and about 1%, that's about overall 1% of the student population. However, about 2 to 4% of the student population meet the criteria for EBD but do not receive services. So there's a lot of students probably in your schools that have EBD but aren't receiving the services or who haven't been identified yet.
So some common behaviors that we typically see with EBD, and this list may be familiar to some of you guys, but we really classify them as externalizing and internalizing behaviors. So those externalizing behaviors are those aggressive behaviors, conduct behaviors that are very noticeable because it's really noticeable if a kid is flipping a desk or hitting other people or talking back to the teacher, whereas those internalizing behaviors a lot of times are behaviors that may be less noticeable, and those kids may be less frequently identified with EBD because it revolves more around anxiety and fear, sadness, depression, a lot of withdrawal symptoms, may be considered apathetic in the classroom and not motivated by a lot of the rewards offered. So EBD can look very different with these two classifications of symptoms. But it's really important to be able to correctly identify what's going on with the kid and see where they need the most support and help. And really, I start always with a positive relationship. I am a behavioral therapist and I believe in behavioral therapy, but I'm a person-centered therapist first because I believe that you have to have that positive relationship to then be able to effectively do behavioral interventions. So thinking about students with EBD and students with disabilities in general, that 70 to 80% of students with disability only receive school-based services. Students with EBD often need more support, but they're often going to reject it as well. That emotional support from a teacher, though, is the greatest predictor of academic success in the development of social skills. So when you're looking at developing a behavioral intervention or working with the child, I think it's really important to look at the relationships that child has within the school and identify whether a relationship needs to be established, maintained, or restored. The EMR method that Cook recommends in 2018. And so establishing, you're looking for ways that you can develop a relationship with that student. You can do that by spending time with the student, showing them that you care, the random acts of kindness, celebrating their achievements, and asking questions, find out their interests. Typically, when I began working with a student as a behavioral specialist, I would make it very clear to everybody on the team, the teachers, the administration, that for the first 2 weeks, I would just work on, first of all, doing observations and identifying what their behaviors were, but also just building a relationship with them. So it would be a 2-week process before I ever started behavioral interventions with the clients that I worked with in school settings. The second thing that you can do is look at how do you maintain that relationship? How do you continue to support and foster it? Looking at your positive to negative corrections for that child, empathizing with that student, identifying times to deliver specific praise, positive notes home, I think is a huge one. Maintaining consistent communication with parents. A lot of parents of EBD students, they only hear from the school when it's something that's bad has happened. And I would contact my parents weekly on Thursdays. I just had that in my routine because I knew Fridays got crazy for me. But every Thursday, I would call all the parents of the kids that I worked with. And I had parents who told me, you know, like I freaked out when the school called me and then I realized it was Thursday and you were just calling to give me an update. So kind of even just changing that perception of when they see the school number on their phone, what their reaction is to it. At the same time, I've also had kids that when they get in that routine of they know that I'm keeping their parents updated. I had a 3rd grade student who was having a meltdown and I was called in on a Thursday. And as soon as I walked in, he's like, "You're going to call my mom and tell her about this." And I gave it up to him and said, there are 2 ways that I can address this with your mom. Either I call her and I tell her that you had a meltdown and you got a referral, which is where we're headed right now. Or I can call her and say you got upset, but you were able to get yourself together, clean up your mess, and get back to work. And those are the 2 options I kind of see for you. And he chose option 2 and got himself together. And that was what I was able to tell his mom on that Thursday. So thinking of also that consistency when you develop relationships with the parents and the students, that they know you really want to tell what's best about them. You don't want to have that negative conversation. You want to be able to focus on the positive with them. And that's really important to the maintaining relationships with EBD students. But there are also times you have to restore the relationship, and there are students that really can burn a lot of bridges within a school, and that relationship with the teacher or the administration becomes really strained and has to be reestablished. So some ways you can do that is meet with students privately, ask for a do-over, or take responsibility. Sometimes we may incorrectly judge a situation, and then when everything comes together, we realize that we made an instant judgment and we were wrong. So actually taking responsibility for that is a great way to restore the relationship. Engage in effective communication in telling them that you care. Forgive the student, but also be willing to ask for forgiveness. And that's a really hard piece sometimes. But I have found that when I'm able to take responsibility with students, when maybe I've made an incorrect assumption, that the students, we are able to build respect for each other through those conversations. But also to know for my students, I would always tell them, okay, today is over, because usually we're having these conversations at the end of the day. Tomorrow we start afresh. And so they know I'm not going to hold this incident over them if it was something that they're at fault for, because tomorrow's a new day and tomorrow we start fresh. And so we're not going to talk about this. We've moved on together. So I'm sure that, you know, just having some quick resources for teachers would be really helpful in dealing with students with EBD and working with students with EBD. So these are some ones that really have worked with me in the past, resources that I've provided teachers. One, creating routine checklists. A lot of times students with EBD have some hyperactivity and attention deficit issues as well. And so just even that start to the school day, they come in and they may seem like they're all over the classroom. unable to get themselves together, ready for the school day. So creating a routine checklist, I usually laminate it and use a whiteout marker so we can just erase it every day, but that they can go through the routine checklist, turn it into the teacher, and they have some kind of incentive to keep that process going. Having visible boundaries in the classroom as well, sometimes just duct tape on the floor. If you have a student that I've had in the past who likes to get in the teacher's desk or come behind the teacher's desk, having that duct tape boundary kind of reminded him of where he should be. I've also done duct tape around their desk classroom because if you have a child, again, with the hyperactivity who just can't sit still, giving them a boundary where they can stand and do their work is often helpful to keep them still on task, but give them the option of standing if they need to. Giving classroom jobs helps them develop responsibility and sometimes also just keeps kids busy. So I've given kids tasks of just making sure the lunch count is done or making sure all the trash is cleaned up at the room. If you know a kid has a short attention span and this is how long they're going to sit for, having some classroom jobs that they have the ability to get up and do them will not only give them some responsibilities, and build that responsibility for them, but also keep them from getting in trouble by just staying in their seat. Pay attention to seat assignment. I know that a lot of times when I've worked with kids with EBD, is to kind of put them off to the side, have given them their own space. But I found that what's most helpful is for them to be in the front row, close and have a direct line of sight to the teacher. Because if they are in the back of the classroom, there's more for them to see. There's more people for them to talk to. Whereas if they're in the front row, right in front of the teacher, they have that direct line and most of the distractions are behind them. Using individualized affirmations. So not just like a good job or you did great today, but I would have individualized affirmations that my students knew I only said to them, that you are smart, strong, and in control. Mature young men make mistakes, but they do better. And those were phrases that they knew I only told them to affirm the choices that they were making. It's also important to establish some goals and rewards, but with the student, that these are goals and rewards that they see as important and that they are striving towards. Because if it's a reward that they don't want or a goal that they don't think is important, then there's less buy-in. Whereas if you can say, what would make the school day go better? How could your day improve? And what should be those goals that they see that, oh, I need to do this. I need to sit in my seat more. These are rewards I want. I want to be able to play basketball or take a football at recess. There's more buy-in when those conversations happen with the student.
So Esther focused on really, the importance of building relationships. So everything that she was saying really has the foundation of building relationships, how to establish, maintain, and restore. So play therapy can be one of those ways and interventions that you can help establish, maintain, and restore relationships with our students. So what I'm going to go through a little bit is a brief background of play therapy. There is so much more to know and to learn about play therapy than what will be in this presentation. But we'll talk a little bit about the history and the background of it, just so you get an understanding of why we use it. And then also we'll end with some focus on play strategies and interventions that you can use in the school with your students. So one of my favorite quotes as a play therapist is that you can discover more about a person in 1 hour of play than in a year of conversation. If you think about children, from the moment they wake up in the morning, they are playing. Play is innate to children. That's how they learn. That's how they engage with the world, understand the world, others, and themselves. What we know about the way they communicate, children communicate vastly different than adults do. So if you think about being in the store, the grocery store, or Target, and your children want a candy bar at the end of the shopping trip or a toy, and you tell them no, they may ask again, you tell them no again, they may get louder, and eventually they may end up into a meltdown. So essentially, that's something that we don't often see adults do in the middle of stores. They're different. They're communicating their needs in different ways. Children are unable to reason and think and judge the same way adults do. They developmentally, they communicate their needs differently, and their means of communication is through expression, play, and action, not words. So some of the examples Esther was using at the very beginning, talking about some of those externalized behaviors that you may see in the school or a classroom. You know, a child pushing a desk or, throwing a desk or a chair, maybe crumpling up homework or an assignment that they've scored badly on. They are communicating an emotion. We quickly see not only that they're angry, but we see the magnitude and the intensity of the feeling. So although children at elementary age have words that they can say, I'm angry, I'm happy, I'm sad, those feelings are inaccessible at a verbal level when they're in the moment, and they can't illustrate magnitude or intensity of feeling with their words. And that's what they're trying to communicate through their actions. And there's always a function or a purpose behind the individual's behavior. So there's always a reason why the child is engaging in a behavior. Typically, it's not because they hate you. It's, for different reasons. So what are the behaviors telling you? What is the child really saying? So the behaviors hold various functions. Some communicate feelings, some communicate need, some communicate attention, life circumstances or environmental factors, fear or threat, and the child's perception of self. So if you think about a child maybe laying his head down in school on the desk during a class, they could be communicating that they're bored. Maybe they're communicating that they're tired. Maybe they're up all night for various reasons. Maybe they're hungry. They don't have energy to sit and listen with their head up. If you think about a child that's maybe constantly looking around the room, possibly getting up or fidgeting, maybe it is ADHD, maybe it's they have anxiety, maybe they're fearful, maybe they're expressing some environmental factors. Maybe at home they can never relax, so they're not relaxed in class either. Our job as counselors is to find out what they're communicating instead of assuming that they're just being disrespectful or they don't want to be there. Many children want to be in the school. They enjoy the school day, but there's a lot of different demands on them during the school day. So to use an analogy that I use with my students often, if I want to paint a room in my house red, so I'm looking at this room, I'm thinking, yeah, red is a great color for this room. I really need to go get red paint, so I need red paint to paint my room. And I think, oh, great, I've got paint out in my garage. So I go out into the garage and I notice the red paint is on the top shelf. So I go and I can't reach it. I'm jumping and I can't reach it. I can barely even touch it with my fingers. My question to you is, what do I need? Obviously, you're not here answering in person, so hopefully you're answering this at home. But some things that my students say and that initially come to mind is a ladder. If you knew my husband, maybe I need a taller husband. Maybe he's not home and I can get the neighbor down the street, or maybe I just go to Lowe's and buy some new paint. So all of those answers that automatically come to our mind are not necessarily wrong, but that's not what I need. Those are solutions. What I'm needing is the paint. So at the beginning of the analogy, I even said multiple times, I need the paint in the garage. I need the paint that's on the shelf. So I very clearly explained what I need, but so often, because we are helpers, we go into solution focus. We're trying to find and fix the solution. Our job as counselors is to help listen to our clients, our students, and help identify what they're really needing. So often when we're seeing those behaviors in the classroom or at home, we're thinking, well, they need to sit still. They need to be quiet in class so they can learn. They need to do this, this, and this. Those may be our needs for them, but they may have different needs. So our job is to help identify what they're needing, and how we do that is, one way is through play therapy. So what is play therapy? Play therapy differs from regular play in that the therapist helps children to address and resolve their own problems. It builds on the natural way that children learn about themselves and their relationships in the world around them. So in play therapy, we'll talk about the different kinds in just a second, but ideally we are giving the child a space to be themselves, a space to utilize and create the world that they need to, and communicate in the world that they need to. Play therapy essentially is, if you think about if we're working with somebody that does not speak English, we would need a translator to understand what they're trying to communicate to us. Play therapy is that translation. According to play therapists, and all the research that's on play therapy, we utilize play is the way that children communicate. Toys are their words, and play is their communication style. So if we want to meet the child where they are, we need to utilize play because that's the medium in which that they communicate best. So how does it work? Through play therapy, children learn to communicate with others, express feelings, modify behavior, develop problem-solving skills, and learn a variety of ways of relating to others. So these are all things we want our children to learn. We like them to modify their behavior, develop problem-solving skills, and learn from others. Play provides a safe psychological distance from their problems and allows expression of thoughts and feelings appropriate to their development. So instead of shutting down when things get too difficult to explain, they're able to freely process them and express them through play and communicate in the way that feels most safe to them. So there are two main types of play therapy. There are lots of play therapy theories, but they fall under these two categories. The first is non-directive play therapy, or child-centered. So it allows the child to direct the play. The counselor uses reflective listening to encourage expression of feelings and observes behavior. The non-directive method shows unconditional acceptance and builds trust. And children gain understanding of their problems and work towards their own solutions. Non-directive is very similar to person-centered therapy with adults, but it's with play. This can be a little bit more time-consuming, especially in the schools, as the child really is self-directed. So you don't come in with a goal as a counselor. You allow them to kind of direct the session. But similar to what Esther was mentioning earlier on the building relationships with our students, there's this unconditional acceptance and building of trust. So regardless if you use directive play or non-directive play in your schools, there's still elements of non-directive play that we want to use in combination with some of the directive play activities. Some examples of non-directive play that I've used in the schools when I visited students before. I had a kindergartner that was kind of struggling with a bully in class, and we utilized a sand tray. It was really a rice tray. He chose the rice tray and went over, and what he did was he buried all these little cars underneath the sand, and then he took a bigger car, and the bigger car uncovered each of the individual cars separately and then threw them across the room. The little cars were yelling, and he did this same play pattern for about 3 weeks in a row, so 3 sessions in a row. But each time it got shorter and shorter. And then on the last week, one of the last car that the big car was about to throw out, talked to the bigger car, and they became friends, and they went and gathered all the little cars again. Again, I didn't know he was having a bullying issue. We just knew all of a sudden this kindergartner loved going to school, and all of a sudden he hated it and he didn't want to go back. So I didn't know where to start with him. There wasn't any questions that he was necessarily answering. When I asked him questions, he didn't answer. When he started playing it out, he was able to show me through his play that, okay, something's happening possibly with one student in the class. I didn't talk to his teacher at that time. I just continued to allow the session to continue. And after 3 or 4 sessions of that same play theme, he eventually was excited to be back at school. So it resolved itself, or he resolved whatever he needed to resolve in it. Another example is another little boy that was on the autism spectrum. He had ADHD and had lots of previous trauma. Once we worked through all the trauma history, now we're kind of just working on getting back into the school setting, how to sit in class, things like that. What he did, we had Legos one day, and he was building Legos, and he's just so cute. But he put all these little Lego people heads on one guy. So this one guy had like 6 heads, and he built it up, and then all of a sudden he started yelling, and he threw all the heads around the room, and he looked at me and he said, Miss Jessie, this guy is trying so hard to control his brain, but it feels like he has like 9. And then he went and he grabbed one head and he said, but this guy's going to keep trying. So it showed me, that he really is trying to work on keeping his brain. It's so active in class. He's so interested in other things and distracted that he was really working on the goals that his teachers and I have been trying to work on with him in the school setting. So some of the directive play, The counselor plays a bigger role and encourages the child to engage in specific activities. Directed play has an identified topic and goal, and it's also used to teach children skills. This is where you can bring in, CBT approaches that are kid-friendly, identifying feeling activities. Those are all more directive and their play intentional. We'll talk more about that later on when we get to the different interventions and activities that we have at the end of the presentation. So what does a client need from us as counselors? The counselor's role is to be different than any adult that the child has contact with. So this counselor role that we have is so different to the child than anything else. We're not their parent. We don't have to punish them. We're not their teacher. We don't have to evaluate their progress. We're not their coach. We're not any of these different roles that they're used to or familiar with already. We are somebody that is there for them to trust, which that takes time, for them to share things, for us to help them process through different activities and different life experiences. And we're supposed to be unconditional and positive regard, and they don't always understand what that means. So how can you still like me when I'm acting bad? Because when I'm acting out or breaking things or throwing things, it's pretty clear my teacher's frustrated. It's pretty clear my parents get frustrated. So how are you different? So it's our job, just like Esther said, she takes about 2 weeks when she starts working with children with EBD to develop rapport and develop a relationship. It takes time for the students to see you in a different light, to not see you as a disciplinarian. It's our job to get on the child's level. So I know we've heard that in our counseling programs. We need to meet our clients where they are. Literally, we have to get on the child's level, and that means using play, maybe sitting on the ground, being at their level, not this hierarchy type formatting, and using play as their communication since it's the most natural for children. We always make them come up to our level to use the words that we want them to use to express themselves in these adult type fashion when they're not adults, they're children. We have to have acceptance for that child, even in the moments of maladaptive behaviors. And I think this is one of the most difficult parts as an adult, because it's hard to maybe have a child 5, 6, 7 throw things at you, spit on you, maybe say cuss words or things like that without having some kind of reaction. Acceptance for the child does not mean we accept the behavior, but we accept that child, and that means we have to keep our reactions to a minimum during those circumstances. A strong relationship of acceptance of the child as they are. The relationship in itself is sustainable for growth and change. So the main focus of Esther's presentation was really about relationships, because relationships are what change and help the child grow. And again, like I mentioned before, staying calm, present, and understand that the intense expressions of communication are not personal. So behavior is expressions of communication. So if we can try to train ourselves to look through the behavior into what this child is communicating. So when they're having a meltdown, looking through the meltdown and thinking, man, this kid is really angry. This kid is really sad at whatever's happening. So really looking through the behavior and trying to figure out what they're communicating and what their need is. So considerations for play in schools, we don't always have the most ideal playrooms for everything. And we also know that schools, are based on fit and size. So we don't always have our own offices, things like that. But if you're going to have toys in your school, ideally the more categories you can have, the better. But if you have a dollhouse with people that bend, not Barbies because they're attributed to Barbies, but something just Fisher-Price, I think, has really good people, that their arms move, their legs move, so they look like real people. Kids don't really like the stiff ones as well. If you have a dollhouse with people, that's my first go-to. You learn a lot about their life environment, relationships, possible school. Even boys play with them. I call it a playhouse instead of a dollhouse. So kids, like this and will interact with it. Paper, crayons, and markers. It's the simplest thing to have around. We can do a lot of creative activities with those. Soft and squishy balls. So Ideally, we'd like them to express their emotions with us. We're the counselors. We're supposed to be the ones that take those emotions and we can handle them. So have things in there that they can throw without breaking something. So soft and squishy balls. I don't recommend hard ones. At some point, they will get thrown. So soft and squishy, protect yourself and your stuff. Board games, card games. I play Uno with lots of variations of rules with lots of different kids at different ages. Candyland, you can make that into more of a therapeutic processing game. Blocks and Legos, so they can build and destroy. I think are all really great starts for some play in schools.
And just if you wouldn't mind me interjecting here for just a second, I also like to have stuffed animals. In particular, I have some weighted stuffed animals that are heavier with like rice in them, or the ones that kind of heat up, like that have a heating mechanism in it. And in particular, I've had 2 students who had been abused in the past. And when Jesse's talking about the function of the behavior, their violence was kind of a craving for physical touch, but because of their abuse history, they could not ask for it. And so I kept, it was actually an occupational therapist who recommended this to me, was having stuffed animals that when they came in for group or individual sessions, they could grab and give hugs to and really develop and get that function of that thing that they wanted physical touch, they wanted a hug, but they couldn't ask for it. And I found that really helpful to have in my office. And they were just in the corner. My clients could grab them when they wanted them. If they didn't have to. But that was always something I kept in my office as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great addition. Thanks for mentioning that, Esther. So some things that you can do. So we want to make sure we have some takeaways for you all to try in your schools and your offices with your students. So we're going to talk through a couple different activities. So here's a gingerbread assessment or gingerbread people. I'm sure you've seen variations. Some people do hearts or circles. I just like the person. I am not an artist, so I print these out. Sometimes I draw them when I'm going to bind, which is a good laugh for the students. It looks more like an alien, but it also puts us on an even playing ground, so that's fine too. So this is an assessment tool that I use to kind of gauge how they're feeling in different environments. So we can do it at home, at school, at mom's house, at dad's house. This is an example of one that we've used before. So ideally, I usually pick 3 to 5 emotions. This child wanted to display a lot of different emotions. There's happy, sad, mad, scared, bored, safe, and worried, it looks like. So they choose, I usually pick 3 emotions and give them a choice of 1. I always try to pick an easy emotion like happy or silly to throw in there so not everything's so heavy. You could do a person for at home and a person for at school. This one we did at mom's house and at dad's house. We draw 2 gingerbread people here. They pick the color for the emotion. And I start with one color and I go through each blank. I say, okay, happy is your green color. When you're with mom, how happy are you? Color how much happy you are when you're with mom. And we move through all the different emotions. Some don't show up in others and some do. Once we do that, we do it for both people or both places. And then I ask some more probing questions like, okay, you've got a lot of happy there with mom. Tell me some things that make you happy with mom. And they'll say, and then I write them out to the side. So this one says, she's nice to me. They feel safe. She won't let anything happen to me. She helps me. So those are reasons why she feels safe with mom. At dad's, there's a lot of scared feeling, that orange. And then maybe it looks maybe purple, so bored. So she's bored at dad's because mom and sister aren't with me. She's scared. I don't remember I can't see when he has one of his fits in front of me. So we get a lot of information about what's happening in both homes. It's not necessarily a processing tool at the moment. It's more just gaining information. This is a lot of vulnerability that we ask for them to share, but it makes it very safe because they're coloring, and it's an easier way for them to express things in this way than just asking them questions. So some other activities that we have, there's something called a kinetic drawing, which is pretty fun. You have them draw them and maybe a friend in school, or again, if there's issues at home, maybe draw you and mom doing something together. or draw you and your best friend doing something. That doesn't have to be together, but it could just be doing something. And then you ask, who is this person? What are they doing? What is this person like? What do you like about this person? What do they like about you? And you ask different probing questions about the kinetic drawing. Again, quick draw. So there's a lot of different drawing activities that you can do. These are just some. So the quick draw, you maybe set a timer for 30 seconds and you say, draw yourself having the most fun you've ever had. Draw your best friend. Draw what you want to be when you grow up. Draw something that scared you. So you're giving them 20 seconds, 30 seconds. It's not long, but you give them a prompt to draw something quickly. My recommendation is when you do a lot of these things, you do it with them and you contribute in a very safe way where you're not necessarily sharing too much about yourself. But again, it levels that playing field so you're not just sitting there watching them draw, because that feels weird. So I do the same things with them. You can read stories that they can relate to, very concrete. Kids love to be read to. It's a nurturing activity. And if they can relate, if you have an idea of what their story is, you could get a relatable story and see what they connect with. There's a magic wand drawing. If you had a magic wand, what are 5 wishes that you would have, or you could use this wand for? Again, you're gaining more information. You spend time really drawing the magic wand. It's fun for them. It's inventive. There's something you can do called the mirror game, and this works pretty well virtually too, because you can see each other on Zoom or Teams or whatever platform you're using. So it's kind of like Simon Says, but instead of saying Simon Says, I move my right arm up, you just move. So if I'm the leader, I would move my right arm, and then they would copy me on their screen. And then I would change, they would copy me, and I'd do funny things, and they copy you. And then you switch and have them be the leader, and you copy them. So it gets them, again, engaged. You're meeting them where they are. This is a good rapport building activity, and you can do it virtually. The mirror game, or the Candyland and other board games, there's plenty of ways to change these. If you land on certain colors, talk about these feelings. Or if maybe it's just goal setting, maybe it's, understanding how to lose, that could just be a goal in itself. Sand tray, doll houses, and miniature figures. I would use those more in a non-directive way. You can give them an idea of, show me what it looks like in your world. I've had kids really take that one directive and create an entire world that I would have never guessed that they were, going through or explaining. So some virtual telehealth considerations. So I know this is where we are at the time, and it's difficult. So it's really, I don't have any secret tips to make this perfect or better. I wish I did, because it is hard, and I see clients virtually of all ages, and it can be difficult. So what I've learned for the little ones, elementary age, 30 minutes is probably the max you're going to get for a therapy session on virtual. It's hard enough for them to sit still. They're not supposed to be sitting still all day long anyway. They're meant to move. But when you move on virtual, then you're out of the camera and you can't see them anymore. So I've had lots of children just run away, still talking to me, but I can't see anything that they're doing on the screen. So really minimizing your session time. So 30 minutes if you can virtually. I would combine maybe allowing them to lead an activity first and then come in with a more directive activity. It's more difficult to do non-directive on virtual. You can do a blend. So when you're doing an activity, you'd still use those non-directive reflections and things like that. But I usually start off with, say, hey, we're excited to see each other. Let's take the first 5 to 10 minutes to tell me everything you want to tell me, or show me whatever you want to show me, because usually they're excited about something to show you. And then I set a timer. When the timer goes off, we switch to the activity that I'd like to focus on. So if we're focusing on any type of coping skill, and we do the activity, and then it's typically over. Drawing activities are one of the easiest to do virtually, and there's plenty of drawing activities that you can do, more than just what's listed, because they can work on it, you can work on it, and then you can show it to each other virtually. And if they're old enough where they can stay focused on the screen, you can have them bring 5 to 6 of their favorite toys in the screen with you and play, but that can be a little bit more challenging. And then really just patience. So it's really hard for them to focus for 30 minutes on, nonstop on a little screen when there's so much other distraction behind them that you can't see. And it's hard for you to really, it feels like you're pulling things out of them in a virtual sense. So try to remember what they are gaining even from meeting with you for 30 minutes on a virtual screen. This could be 30 minutes of them not getting in trouble. It could be 30 minutes of them sharing something about themselves that they haven't been able to share with somebody else. 30 minutes of seeing a familiar face from school that they've maybe missed from not being in school as much. So you're still providing a lot in the time that you are in a virtual space. And then just being creative on how to use some drawing activities and things like that in the mirror game to engage and interact with your students.
So I know we've given you a lot of information today, and if hopefully our goal was to think of you. We know as school counselors, you're very busy. You have so many things that you're doing, but I know in your heart that your main goal is to help children and students and their families. And so we hope that from this, you've had at least one or a few takeaways that you can, continue your work with students. But here's my email. And if you have specific questions about what we covered, you can definitely reach out to me. And then, more specifically, I can connect you with Esther or Jesse. We have some references and resources also. Here's some books that may be helpful, websites, articles, it's always good to have, some references and resources at your fingertips to help you. Some of these we covered in the presentation. Also, you'll be receiving, if you haven't already, a survey about the presentation and the content. And so we really encourage you to fill that out. That only helps us get better as we share this information, but also to, understand what you need in your schools and how we can help you. So we really thank you and thank Sherry for, giving us this time to be with you. We wish you could be in person. Hopefully next year we can do something more in person, or, we're welcome, we're happy to come to your districts or to your schools, and however we can be helpful. That's our main goal, to help kids in the state of South Carolina.
Thank you so much, Dodie and Esther and Jesse, for joining us today. This is Sherry Beaver, School Counselor Liaison with South Carolina Department of Education, and we hope you enjoyed this webinar and the impactful and useful, relevant information presented today. Thank you for joining us.